Welcome to episode 162 of the Half Point Per Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Riggs, joined as always by my co-host, Dalton Willie, and producer, Johnny Pham. Guys, it really is a great day today. November 20th, officially started digging out Christmas decorations from the garage. House looks a little bit brighter on the inside. Are you guys like post Thanksgiving? You have anything up? I know, Johnny, you're in a much different living space than you were last Christmas, so I'm not sure how that has changed things for you.
We have nothing.
You have
I live alone and lack the touch of a woman in my apartment, so maybe we'll stack a couple of Bud Light cans on and throw a little angel on top and call it a tree.
You don't have any Christmas, Johnny. I understand because he made a pretty massive move and downsized their stuff. I know no woman's touch, but no tree, no a wreath.
You think Dalton is gonna have a tree or anything decorative in his house? If he stays there for the next 4 years, I don't think he'll put any wall art behind him. Decorate anything, any season, even a happy birthday banner, nothing will be there.
I am realizing as I say that I'm looking at the wall behind him, and it could not be more blank.
There's wall art in front of me.
Barely. He's lived there for 3 years.
And he hasn't just lived there. He's lived back in Kansas for 4 years, 5 years.
Pre-COVID.
Yeah, that's tough scene. All right, we've got a lot to get to today. The pop culture Superlatives was a fun show last year. We decided to bring it back. Just if you haven't figured this out yet, this is just a way for us to talk about more players in fun ways. Next week's just a scheduling note off the top. We will be going on Monday, probably a little bit of a shorter show than usual next week too, and we'll be going on Monday, obviously. Thanksgiving finally next week. Seems like the latest Thanksgiving of all time. Dalton, you're shaking your head. Why are you shaking your head?
I'm excited about Thanksgiving.
You're excited about Thanksgiving? That's good. Proud of you. So we've got pop culture spoilers today. Monday show next week. But Dalton, we're gonna start this one off with the classic. Who's that Pokemon? I'll let you lead the way here.
Who's that Pokemon?
So,
this would be real awkward if you don't have one.
No, I do. It'd be way funnier if I didn't, though. This player is fourth among running backs in snaps played in third down and distance situations, sixth among running backs in passing situations.
So is this just to be clear? This is total, not per game.
Total.
Okay, so guys.
No, sorry, per game.
Okay,
per game. That is important. It has to be per game, otherwise it wouldn't make sense. He is sixth among all running backs in rushing success rate and third in the NFL in red zone carries on his team. He's in
but now the third on his team, that is total, right?
Yeah, total.
Okay.
Who's that Pokemon? He's in the NFC.
Is that Christian McCaffrey?
No, that would have been a really stupid one. But this player has missed time.
In the NFC, clearly a pass down running back has missed time. I'm struggling to think of other pass catching running backs in the NFC who have missed time.
What if I told you wouldn't think he's a pass catching running back?
Okay, Zach Charbonnet.
Wow, you were on the right team.
Okay, so Kenneth Walker.
It's Kenneth Walker.
I thought about Kenneth Walker. I was like, ooh, Zach Charbonnet. I went back and forth between those two.
Yeah, so over the last 5 weeks, he's actually tripled the number of routes that Sharp has run from fantasy data. And
wait, who's ahead in red zone of Kenneth Walker then on his
Derrick
team?
Henry, Saquon Barkley.
Oh, that was not his team. Okay, I was thinking.
Sorry, yeah, what I said.
You said it right. I was thinking of it wrong. Now I remember what you said.
Yeah. But yeah, he's it's kind of an insane season for him. And I think if he would have been healthy all season, he'd be like a top 6 back at this point. He's RB 18 right now, and in points per game, he's RB 7. So
yeah, Kenneth Walker's had an insane year. And it's funny, you said, you might not think of him as a pass catcher. And by role, you might think that. But just when I think of probably the best highlight that Kenneth Walker has had this year, it is as a receiver on that wheel route where he went up and mossed the linebacker or DB and brought down that ball in the end zone. So, yeah, I mean, he's had just an outstanding season this year.
Well, and as the head coach of the Michigan State Spartans, I can say that schematically we don't throw the running back a lot, so you're just not going to see that on the tape coming out of college, which is it's going to color your vision of him.
Who's that Pokemon?
Sorry,
Okay,
we love to know Michigan State Spartans.
Mine is a quarterback. He is top 12 in scoring at the position. However, he is the quarterback 18 if you look at the last month. His last top 12 finish was in week 6, and he was the QB 9 in that week. And 3 of his 4 lowest rushing yardage totals have come in the past 3 weeks. Who's that Pokemon?
What division is he in?
Okay, division is going to narrow it down to 4 players.
I'm in a conference.
He's in the NFC, and I feel like that alone probably made it quite a bit easier.
Rushing.
Jalen Hurts.
No, but you are in the right division. Make it real easy.
Oh, it's Jaden Daniels.
It's Jaden Daniels. And
Oh, good job, Dalton.
yeah, we'll give Johnny 3/4 of that point. It is interesting because I feel like people have really hot takes about Jaden Daniels kind of one way or the other right now. Either it's the NFL has figured him out, or Cliff Kingsbury is doing the Cliff Kingsbury thing that he does every year, which, I mean, maybe it's Cliff Kingsbury who likes Call of Duty. Maybe it's not Kyler Murray who's in the Call of Duty.
Have you seen Theo Ashton's graph of Cliff Kingsbury's EPA? And every season, it's like November hits and it's like straight to the dumpster.
Yeah, and something tells me that's more about the offense. Although, who knows? Maybe Cliff could be a Call of Duty player, or maybe it is some combination of that. And also, Jaden Daniels did hurt the ribs about 4 weeks ago, so that is also complicating factors here and making it tough for us to really figure out what's going on. Matt Waldman, if you follow him on Twitter, had a really good thread, or just a series of tweets. I'm not sure if Waldman actually knows how to do threads on Twitter. Had a really good series of tweets just breaking down some different Jaden Daniels plays, and basically just some plays where the processing just wasn't quite there, wasn't quite right, wasn't where it should be. And he did make the point in his weekly column this week that it does seem like the ribs are definitely a factor. It does seem like the NFL is catching up to Jaden Daniels a little bit. Now, whether that's permanent, I don't know. But his point, I think this is valid. The first 6 or 8 weeks, no matter how it goes, good or bad for a rookie quarterback, usually the first 6 or 8 weeks, teams play law-based defense, maybe a little bit of blitzing, see how they handle it. But you don't really get scouted and adjusted for until later in the season as a rookie, because teams just haven't seen you. So it'll be interesting to see, can he get healthy down the stretch? Is that all it is? Can he kind of get back one step ahead of the defense, or is this kind of the Cliff Kingsbury gets figured out every year? And what's complicating things is they have a week 14 bye, so you only have 2 weeks before the fantasy playoffs to kind of figure it out and see, assuming you don't have a bye in the playoffs, if you really feel good about starting him in the first week of your fantasy playoffs.
Well, it's pretty terrible right now considering the Terry McLaurin dropped off the face of the earth last week with Jaden Daniels being non-performant. Zach Ertz and Austin Eckler leading this team in receiving yards and targets is like a real 2019 moment for us, which I'm not particularly a fan of. But it seems like as he started to struggle, he has left Terry, still wide receiver 7, but he's left Terry McLaurin kind of out of the roadmap for that offense, which is not good for fantasy managers.
Yeah, and I think last week Terry was dealing with a shadow situation that he may have not won that matchup as consistently as you'd like, but also I think there's probably some fault with the quarterback there as well. But really, the main thing, even if some of the processing stuff isn't quite there, if the defenses are catching up to Kingsbury, whatever the case may be, you don't like that 3 of his 4 lowest rushing yardage totals have come in the last 3 weeks. That was obviously a huge part of his game early in the season, and maybe it is just as simple as let's get him to the bye, let's get him healthy. But first week post bye is the first week of the fantasy playoffs, so it's just a situation that I am watching very closely down the stretch of the fantasy regular season.
Yeah, it's going to be incredibly interesting because that was an offense that had everybody excited.
Yeah,
the first 12 weeks of the season. Cliff Kingsbury, you struck again. You tricked me. I was ready. I bought in. I was wrong yet again.
We'll see. I still think the jury is still out a little bit there, but yeah, it will be interesting to watch them down the stretch. And with that said, Dalton, let's jump right into the pop culture superlatives here. So the way this is done, I'm copying a podcast, 6 Trophies, where they give away trophies every week. And they have a couple of the same trophies every week and a couple of different ones. And they play a lot of like lines from movies and TV shows. Very entertaining. We have a couple drops, not dropped for all of them. One of the ones that we had a drop for last year that I cannot locate, didn't have time to make a new one, is the Logan Roy Not Serious People trophy. Dalton, who earns your Logan Roy Not Serious People trophy?
Okay. The entire New York Giants earned my Not Serious People trophy. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One, I am starting to get worried that fantasy darling Dalton Tracy is going to get benched. I don't know if you saw the game last week. He had a fumble that led to a scoring drive, and then he had a tipped pass that led to an interception.
This is also a week after he literally fumbled the game away in wherever they were playing, London or Germany, I can't remember.
Yes. So the Tyrone Tracy stonks are starting to go down over the last 3 weeks, and this could be position or matchup related. He has had significant declines in his yards per carry and his yards per target. He's not playing football well. But to make matters worse, the New York Giants are trotting out DeVito at quarterback. Seems they're doing it because they don't want to pay Drew Lock like his $150,000 game bonus for every game he plays, which is equally absurd because I was a little excited to see like what Drew Lock was doing.
Not for Drew Lock, but for Malik Neighbors. Like I was like, please give us some downfield throwing for Malik Neighbors.
But now we're on to Tommy Salami, and not excited about this guy. It's not a great fantasy option. Rondell Robinson is on pace to be 4th in the league in targets and have the lowest ADOT on recorded record, which that's just, it's so terrible because he's not a viable fantasy starter unless it's PPR. And even then you're getting like 8 points on 8 catches, which is really hard to do. Malik Neighbors was off to such a hot streak, and the Giants have been incapable of utilizing him effectively since he's come back from his concussion. There's not a player, and this includes Malik Neighbors, that I'm comfortable starting week to week on this offense. And they've made the offense worse by removing Daniel Jones from it, which I didn't think I would say. But there's just not anything going on in New York, both New York teams for that matter, that I'm really a fan of right now.
Yeah, we'll get to the other one later. Yeah, Tommy Salami is going to be taking his lunchtime walks with Johnny pretty soon because he's about to be unemployed in New York. Not that Johnny's unemployed; he just takes lunchtime walks in New York. But I mean, the situation, you think about Malik Neighbors specifically before the year. This is kind of what we were afraid of. After the first month, we're like, wow, he's just so good that it doesn't matter. I still think he is that good. Turns out the situation is just so bad that it actually still matters. And it's been such a bummer for him. And yeah, you said it. We were really hoping that Drew Lock could come and bring some stability to this passing game. And just the fact that that sentence is coming out of my mouth shows you how bad things have been in the passing game for New York.
The emergence of Wandale Robinson, it's like the path to Malik Neighbors being amazing in fantasy regardless was just feeding him targets.
Yeah.
And he's getting like 8 targets a game, it's just heavily inflated from earlier in the season. And there's not an argument for Waddell to get as many targets as he's getting per game because he's not doing anything with them. He's one of the least efficient players on a per target basis. And because of that, we can't even get like a Jalen Waddle rookie season where Malik Neighbors is hampered by a terrible offense, but he has 110 catches. We don't care because he's going to be productive every week for us.
Yeah, no, it is not a good situation. Definitely full of not serious people. Mine, probably a little bit less on the nose than yours, but I just felt like ranting about Kyle Shanahan and the San Francisco 49ers this evening. And a lot of this will be directed at Kyle Shanahan. However, I do want to direct a little bit of ire at Deebo Samuel. I mean, talk about a guy that in the past, if he gets this set up, no Ayuk, and then this week, no Kittle, or last week, no Kittle, you're thinking blow up for Deebo Samuel. 4 fantasy points without either of those guys on the field. His previous 2 weeks, obviously Ayuk has been out for all of that time, 10 points and 10 points, which is fine, but we're expecting top 12 wide receiver type of numbers in these situations, and he's just not been able to deliver that. Part of that, I think, his defenses are just not getting fooled by these gimmicky plays that Shanahan draws up. Like, teams are all over that, it seems like right now. He's averaging a career low in yards per carry. It's like under 3, which think about for a receiver. I know he gets some backfield carries, but he also gets like the jet sweeps and things that should get more yards where he should not be averaging 3 yards per carry. His yak and his tackle breaking numbers are both down. You just watch him. He just hasn't quite been that guy this year. And he's struggling to separate as a receiver, but that's kind of always been a thing for him. So then you look at if some of that other stuff, the rushing, just the tackle breaking, if some of that stuff is really not going to come back to full form, I'm not exactly sure what to do with Deebo Samuel down the stretch because Jawan Jennings is frankly outplaying him at the receiver position. And during their game, I don't remember who was calling it. They ran a play for Deebo, and the announcer said something like, "Man, you kind of wish that ball went to Jawan Jennings there." And it's like, oh my God, like what world are we living in? So not great for Deebo. And then we talked about this a little bit last week, happened again this week. Christian McCaffrey has just come back and he's just playing every snap, 89 and 93% of the snaps the last 2 weeks. And to my eye, to the eye of 49ers fans who are complaining on Twitter, he does not look 100% to me. He could, of course, still get there. It's fine. He took a rest day in practice this week. It's like, gee, I wonder if there would be any other way to get Christian McCaffrey rest during the season this year. But I mean, he handled 68% of their rushing snaps his first week back, 86% of their rushing snaps, 45% of their plays on Sunday were drawn up for Christian McCaffrey. You look at Jordan Mason, he has 3 carries his last 2 games. I went for 5, 8, and 5 yards. Like, I don't know, man, like Kyle Shanahan is just really grinding my gears. And then you just look at what has been, I think, a bigger issue for the Niners all season. It kind of reared its ugly head in the Super Bowl last year. Teams being able to load up and blitz on a side. Ted Wynn wrote about this a little bit. I mentioned to you there's a great TikTok video breakdown of all things where it really breaks down a lot of key plays where teams are able to dictate where the Niners throw the ball because they load up and Purdy does not have the authority to make to change the protection at the offensive line. And it has led to them throwing exactly where the defense wants on a lot of plays. And I think that has contributed to slowing this offense down too. So the Niners, whether it's Deebo not being the same guy he used to be for now, Christian McCaffrey not being 100% healthy, and Kyle Shanahan stubbornly leaning into things that are hurting this offense right now, there's just a lot wrong with the team that is 5-5 and could very easily miss the playoffs in a crowded NFC, in a crowded division. And of course, I mean, for fantasy, these guys are not living up to what we need them to be outside of Jawan Jennings and then when he plays George Kittle.
Yeah, and the protection stuff's probably the worst because Brock Purdy is still playing at a pretty good level, in a level that could support multiple fantasy assets on this team, which is what makes it more annoying. The Christian McCaffrey workload, it's really one of those decisions that you feel like the general manager needs to get involved to be like, look, you're going to kill him. And if we make the playoffs, Chris McCaffrey is not going to get healthier running the bulk of this team's carries, especially when the only way to be successful in the NFL and having such a concentrated running back doing so many things is when the running back is really efficient. And Christian McCaffrey's not that right now. Jawan Jennings being their best receiver is not good. Mm-hmm. Ricky Pearsall not playing more snaps is a little confusing because, frankly, he's looked better than Debo has in a lot of the snaps he's had out there on the field. Yeah. Debo looks like something has caught up with him. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the fact that he was utilized as a running back for 3 seasons.
There's a lot of pictures of Debo going around, and I know Johnny will appreciate this. A lot of pictures of Debo going around, and then they throw up the James Harden and the powder blue warm-ups where James Harden had purposely got fat, and it's like, oh, Debo does look a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I mean, well, when they played the Chiefs and Debo had pneumonia and people were like, no, Debo just got really fat. That's the problem. It's not good vibes in San Francisco. And this is a team, I talked about this in the preseason, that was the first team in like 15 years to have 3 1,000-yard players in George Kittle, Debo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuk. Mm-hmm. And this year, George Kittle is on pace for 1,000 yards and nobody else on the team.
I was going to say, yeah. And Kittle obviously missed last week. Is he going to play this week? If Kittle were to miss any more time down the stretch, this might be an offense with 0 1,000-yard players anywhere, rushing or receiving, which is like, imagine saying that before the season and having at least a couple of the guys play a majority of the season.
Yeah. And when you don't have 3 all-pros to throw to, you need to let your quarterback take control of the game. And until Kyle Shanahan gets his ego out of his ass, it's not going to happen. And that's the limitation of this team. And they're going to meet it until Brock Purdy is allowed to either make mistakes that Shanahan doesn't want him to make or to dictate the game on his own terms. And this is the same thing that happened to Shanahan with the Falcons when they lost to the New England Patriots. He took control of the game script and was refusing to let his quarterback play the game the way the quarterback wanted to. And, I mean, it's ugly and sad. I've seen Grant Cohn, who's a pretty popular 49ers writer, calling for Shanahan to be fired.
Yeah, there are people doing that.
Yes, it might be a little extreme, but also I kind of get it.
Turns out firing the defensive coordinator for allowing 25 points in the Super Bowl in overtime to the Chiefs may not have solved all of their problems. We do have a question in the chat. Trade away Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Jacobs, and Tank Dell for Saquon, Garrett Wilson, and Amari Cooper. He has his team info after that. He also has CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, and T. Higgins. It's a keeper 10-man. I assume I don't know how many, if you get to keep your whole team, if it's only a certain amount. So pretty stacked team. And because it's a keeper, as long as you're actually able to keep multiple play or even just one of the players you're acquiring or trading away, I have a tough time giving up Jahmyr Gibbs in any scenario where this is a multi-year thing.
Yeah, I agree. We don't know how much is left for David Montgomery. He's getting into that you're kind of old running back territory. And if Jahmyr Gibbs is like an 80% backfield share in his coming year, even 70%, there's a lot of explosives left on the board. Even
if he has the same share he has now, he's a top 6 running back right now.
So really, there's more ceiling to him. And even with JJ and Higgins and CeeDee Lamb, I would keep Gibbs out of all those players. So I wouldn't trade away Gibbs under any circumstance in a keeper league, just for the reason that next year he's probably going to be like one of the top 3 backs in a draft. And I'm not super excited about the concept of having to flex Garrett Wilson right now because I don't know where that New York Jets team is heading.
And we think about all of these guys in their upper 20s who are having these great years this year. Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon. Obviously, Chris McCaffrey hasn't had a great year, but still a great player. Alvin Kamara, Saquon, Derrick Henry. Jahmyr Gibbs is 22. He'll be 23 in March. Think about how long of a runway, health permitting, that you have with Jahmyr Gibbs in that scenario. So I'm in on keeping Jahmyr Gibbs on that side of the trade. Okay, next one we do have a drop for, Dalton. This is the Walter White I am the one who knocks trophy.
I am not in danger, Skyler. I am the danger. A guy opens his door and gets shot, and you think that of me? No. I am the one who knocks.
I'll go first on this one because mine is in the thumbnail, no mystery here, and that is Jamar Chase. Were you aware that there is a wins above replacement stat for fantasy football? Because I just learned that today.
No, but he must be high because I did see Sleeper said there are 0.5% teams that are undefeated, and Jamar Chase on 27% of those teams.
Real quick, the guy followed up. We keep one player each year. He kept Lamb last year. So this next year, I was thinking either JJ, Gibbs, or Achane. Unless I did the Saquon trade, I would still keep Gibbs. I think
I would keep Gibbs as well
out of all of those players. But it obviously you can't go wrong with JJ. I mean, either be Gibbs or JJ, but I'd say Gibbs. But anyway, wins above replacement. Turns out Jamar Chase is number one in the entire NFL and fantasy football in wins above replacement, above Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Mixon. In that order, that was from Scott Barrett on Twitter, I believe, from Fantasy Points is where you get those stats. I mean, he is outscoring the wide receiver 2 by 3.6 points per game. If you look at points per game scoring, the wide receiver 2, that goes from Amon-Ra St. Brown to Nico Collins, who missed quite a bit of time. He's still outscoring that guy by 3.2. That is a bigger gap than any other position. Right now, usually we see that at tight end, occasionally at running back. It's pretty rare, I feel like, to see that for a wide receiver. And I went back and looked at Cooper Kupp's Triple Crown year. He outscored the wide receiver 2 that season by 2.8 points per game. So he is outdoing the next best guy by a wider margin than Cooper Kupp did in his record-breaking year where he had the Triple Crown, which is just crazy. I mean, he's had 7 games of over 15 points, 4 games over 20. He obviously had the 50-point game on Thursday Night Football pretty recently. He's on pace for a career high in yards, receptions, and touchdowns. If you want the actual numbers, he's on pace for a cool 112 for 1632 and 19 touchdowns. He already has 12 touchdowns, one off his career high. This is from Doug Clausen on Twitter, who I believe is a CBS researcher. Jamar Chase is the first player with 70-plus catches, 1,000-plus yards, and 12-plus reception touchdowns through 11 games since Randy Moss in 2007. The only other players in NFL history who have done that are Randy Moss in 2007, Marvin Harrison in 99 and 01, and 2001 Terrell Owens. And then, of course, Jamar Chase. This dude is in truly, truly elite company for what he is doing at the position this year.
I believe he was your wide receiver 1, wasn't he, Evan?
Yeah, and then I had to kind of renege on it because we didn't know what the holdout situation. But if we would have updated ranks right before the season, he would have gone back. So yeah, I'm not gonna say I called it to this degree, but I did think we had the potential for we finally get the Jamar Chase wide receiver 1 season, and we seem to be heading that way.
Got to bring up a random tweet I saw and see your thoughts on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody was concerned that with the Bengals, they're not out of playoff contention, but they're getting close. That because it's a contract year, that Jamar Chase starts to sit out. Any concerns?
I mean, sure, I guess, but what can you really do about that? And how concerned can you really be about that? I think that's just one of those where you just have to, if it happens, man, that really sucks, but you can't trade him right now for
under the guys that maybe he won't play a game.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's they're not out of it yet. And if they do, like, they are close enough, they're hanging around enough to where I would imagine they still play it out for a little bit. What's helpful, as long as your fantasy playoffs end week 17 like a sane person, I mean, like week 18, yeah, you could easily see them.
Yeah, if you have week 18 fantasy playoffs, I would trade Jamar Chase right now for Hollywood Brown.
But like, he also, like, think about it the other way. He could be going for some legitimate records, depending like touchdowns are just like yardage records, whether it's franchise, not like NFL records for yardage, probably, unless he really blows up. But like, he could just be going for as big a stats as possible. He could be playing for that contract. Like, hey, you're gonna like, I'm gonna go 1,820 touchdowns. You gonna pay me? Like,
Yes.
you're gonna pay me $5 million more than Justin Jefferson now.
Not just $1 more anymore.
Yeah.
No, I agree. He's on an insane tear. It's a real shame what's happening to the Bengals otherwise. But
the Bengals, I heard this stat today, are the #1 offense in EPA per play when Higgins, Chase, and Burrow have all been on the field together this year.
I imagine they have a good record too. No, but Jamar Chase has been absolutely incredible. It's hard to get a high pick in your fantasy draft that still outperforms that pick, which is what Jamar Chase is doing, and which is why so many teams have gone undefeated with him on their team.
Yep. All right, Dalton, you're up.
Okay, so I'm just going to honorable mention him because I thought it was funny, but there's not enough context to it. I wanted to say Anthony Richardson for the one who knocks because he came back and he just went off, and it was like what I wanted him to be all season, and he did it. Clearly, he can't be there because we have no idea what the rest of the season holds.
You know, that was only the second time in his NFL career he's completed 20 or more passes, with the first being the first game he ever played.
I'm telling you, there's something there. You could tell me it's the second time in his entire career going back to high school he's completed 20 passes, and I'd believe you.
You know, I have to look deeper into that one.
But I went with Saquon Barkley. So Saquon Barkley currently has an explosive rush rate of 28.2%. The only player in the last 15 years that's a running back to hit it in the NFL is Todd Gurley with the Rams.
Wow.
In that same vein, Saquon Barkley has been stopped at the 1 yard line 9 times. Despite that, he's still third in the NFL in running back touchdowns. Did
you catch that note that in his contract his bonus is attached to yards and not touchdowns? So the agent knew what he was doing with that one.
Maybe Howard Roseman isn't a good GM. But the Eagles also over the last 4 weeks are the second lowest pass rate above expectation. They've just decided that they're going to run the ball as much as possible, as frequently as possible, which is working for them. And it's led to like AJ Brown not being stellar because they aren't throwing the ball frequently. But Saquon Barkley is on pace to be second in NFL yards, second in touchdowns, and fourth in receptions. So he's going to be RB2 at a minimum. He could very still edge out Derrick Henry and become the RB1, just because I do think his workload has been more sustainable than Derrick Henry's in the way that he is not off the field no matter what the score is, no matter how the team's playing. And he is nowhere near as touchdown dependent as Derrick Henry is right now. So Saquon Barkley has league winner draped all over him. The Eagles' offensive line right now, from Braden Thorne's rankings, is third in the NFL in run blocking and 15th in the NFL in pass blocking. I don't see any reason for them to go back to the pass because the game is working out exactly how they need it to for them. And I mean, how many players can go back-to-back 30-yard and then 29-yard rushing touchdowns on 2 separate drives just to be a killer? Saquon Barkley is everything that the Giants stole from us for so many years, and it's exciting, and he's here to stay.
Yeah, I mean, there's not many players who deserve this type of season more than Saquon, because he could have done this every year if he had just a functional team around him. So cool to see him balling out and playing well. Hope he stays healthy down the stretch because, yeah, he obviously is set up to continue to have mega production in the fantasy playoffs. And next up, this one might be my favorite.
Stop pooping.
It's the Chris Traeger Stop Pooping Award from Parks and Rec. For those not familiar, this goes to none other than Jalen Waddle. He is the wide receiver.
God damn it.
It's fine. It's fine to have overlap. I think he is like very clear biggest bust in fantasy right now. He is the wide receiver 62, and he's played every game. Like that is absurd. These are some of the guys who he's behind. Xavier Legette, rookie for the Panthers. Deontay Johnson has 1 point, literally 1 point in the last month. Rashid Shaheed has not played football for 5 weeks. Cedric Tillman, he literally had 2 points in the first 5 weeks of the season. Ray McLeod, who had 1 game, and Jalen Tolbert, who has just kind of been blah all season, but better than Jalen Waddle. I mean, it's bad.
Is Rashee Rice outscoring him?
That's a great question, Matt. I can look at and get back over to you, but that wouldn't surprise me. I won't go too long on this, so I'll take all your points. We can kind of go back and forth. But like, I was a skeptic before the season compared to you. Like, we kind of had the Devonta Smith, the Jalen Waddle back and forth. I, in my wildest dreams, would never have imagined this type of season for Jalen Waddle, who in the games that Tua has played in the last month has had 6, 2, and 6 targets. He has gone over 50 yards 1 time, and he has 1 touchdown in those games.
I did put the entire Dolphins wide receiving core on here, so it's a little different. But Jalen Waddle is the point of most of my ire. For one, currently in first read target share on this team in every game, it goes Tyreek Hill, Devon Chain. Guess who's next?
It's Jonnu Smith.
It's Jonnu Smith. And then it's Jalen Waddle. In his last 4 games, fantasy data has charted Jalen Waddle with 2 first read target shares. He's being out received and out yardaged by Jonnu Smith and Devon Chain.
Well, and they're also like using Malik Washington and some around the line of scrimmage stuff right now.
And I think the worst part about this is fantasy data has a win rate against zone and man. And right now they have Jalen Waddle against man at a 8% win rate, which ranks 58th in the NFL. And against zone, they have him at a 27% win rate, which is 49th in the NFL. He's just like, not only is he not getting targets and he's not getting fantasy points, he doesn't seem to be playing well as a player, which is double concerning. And Tua back in the lineup has not saved the fantasy value of him. To an extension of that, Tyreek Hill has also dropped off in every measurable category from last year, which is why he's on this list as well, because he was a first-round pick and he's not been a first-round pick. In fact, over the last 3 games, Jonnu Smith is the leading fantasy points getter on this team among anybody who receives the ball not named Devon Chain.
And he's like the exact type of tight end that they've needed, I think, for this offense.
It's funny because I wrote about it the preseason. I was like, did anybody know that Jonnu Smith was the fastest tight end in football? And it looks like I was right. It's really like a 1-to-1 ratio on this team. Is the player fast? Yeah, the player's probably going to get the football. In fact,
unless you're Jalen Waddle.
Well, going from Next Gen Stats, I thought this was funny, and I went and looked this up. Jalen Waddle has not charted a faster route than Jonnu Smith, for all I could find. Jonnu Smith was clocked at 20.4 miles an hour. The highest I could find going through the last couple of weeks was Jalen Waddle at 19 miles an hour. So he's also slower than Jonnu Smith. It's just like the fantasy goldmine that has been Miami is dried up. It's been taken to the well, and all the players' inflated values really aren't playing
It's just been dispersed, and the only one who hasn't suffered is Devon Chain.
Yes, and that's because he's being force-fed.
Yeah, he's getting a lot of targets in the passing game. I think we have to adjust expectations for both receivers down the stretch. I mean, I think that kind of goes without saying. I mean, I think for Tyreek Hill, you're still starting him. He is still producing okay, just not what we want from Tyreek Hill. I mean, Jalen Waddle, I think he needs to have at least 1 good game on my bench before I'm trusting him and throwing him back out there again. You know, he hasn't scored 7 fantasy points since week 1. Like,
and he has a touchdown.
Just absurd.
Let's play a fun name game here, Evan. Let me find Jalen Waddle in weekly ranks real quick.
Well, I looked. Rashee Rice is 78th, so he is behind Jalen Waddle at this point. Rashee Rice did finish ahead of Brandon Ayuk despite playing quite a few fewer games. That tells you the kind of season Ayuk was having.
Oh, this is so fun. Would you rather start Quentin Johnston or Jalen Waddle?
Quentin Johnston. Like, don't even have to think about Quentin Johnston.
Jerry Judy or Jalen Waddle?
Jerry Judy. Look what Jameis Winston's doing. He's got like 3 top 20 receivers on a weekly basis when he's been playing.
Roma Dunze or Jalen Waddle?
Roma Dunze. I loved how the Bears offense looked. They made it quick and simple for Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams actually made a couple really baller throws down the stretch, too. They, of course, just decided, hey, let's settle for a field goal, and they got blocked.
I'll go down this list a little bit. DeMario Douglas.
I think you've hit my limit. I think I'm still throwing Jalen Waddle out there if those are my only 2 options.
Nick Westbrook-Akinik.
I think I'm still going Waddle. Like, you get to a point where it's like, okay, I know how much you struggled. I would like Nick Westbrook-Akine could easily have 0 targets.
Did you know he has,
given the
I do know this stat. He has 5 touchdowns and 25 targets. So that's more touchdowns than Jalen Waddle has. I know that much.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're both in a pretty similar spot on those 2, which is it's not good. It is not pretty. I mean, when you have gone 10 weeks without scoring more than 7 fantasy points and half point per reception, that is really hard to do for anybody who's playing as many snaps
Let
as he
alone a
is.
second round pick.
Yeah, let alone a second round pick. Like, you know, I thought about guys like Travis Etienne for this. He's been a pretty big bust, but he has still had leaps and bounds a better season than Jalen Waddle. And people talk about Etienne like he's the worst bust I ever was. But like, I mean, Jalen Waddle, it's like a whole another level, which is really too bad because I've really liked Jalen Waddle as a player.
I mean, he might be the worst pick in the fantasy draft so far, non-injury related.
Yeah, I think that's 100%.
Yeah, Sam Laporta would be the only other player I'd even put in the same category. And at least Sam Laporta has had a couple of big games.
Yeah, and like it's at tight end, so even if he's averaging 6 points a game, it's just a lot. It is still damaging because of who you could have gotten, but you still could you could either just start him and take your 6, and your opponent has a 7-point game at tight end. It's like, okay, like if you could, you can find receivers or running backs elsewhere, maybe to kind of patch that up. You're just throwing a ball out there and getting murdered at that spot every week if you are right now.
Yeah, if you're still starting Jalen Waddle weekly, you should probably just stop.
That felt pointed. Okay, in the chat, would you trade Tyrone Tracy, Cade Otton, and Cedric Tillman for Mike Evans? Dalton, Mike Evans was a trade target for you. Yeah, I mean, he has his team if you want to see it, but I agree.
Doesn't even matter to me. First of all, I love Cedric Tillman. I don't love Tracy and Otton too much, although Otton's been really productive because he gets so many targets because of the state of that receiving core.
But when Mike Evans comes back, that Cade Otton value is surely going down a little bit.
So there's one thing I am pretty sure of, and it's that the Buccaneers really care about that 1,000-yard record Mike Evans has. He would have to average 95 yards a game every game to get there, which it's not something he can't do. Secondly,
there's going to be a 185-yard game for Mike Evans at some point down the stretch.
Twice. Also, the Buccaneers have the easiest remaining schedule when it comes to passing defenses. That is because they play so many NFC South teams.
Yeah.
And they play the Giants this week. So I do really think Mike Evans has league winners stapled on him. Of course, there's an asterisk next to his name that says, barring his hamstring is still a problem. I don't think it is. They sat him for close to 5 weeks, let him sit through the bye, and it sounds like he's all good to go. And this is a team direly in need of it. And I can't get away from the fact that Baker has looked electric. Mike Evans is his go-to guy. There's no Chris Godwin, and they're going to mix it up with him and play him in the slot. I just think he goes nuclear.
Yeah. Okay, Dalton. I don't know how many trophies you have left to give away. I brought 3 of my own. How many do you have?
I have 2.
2. Okay, so I will go first, and we'll be a little bit quicker with some of these. I only have a drop for 1 of the remaining 3. My first one is my That's No Moon, That's a Space Station trophy. And that goes to Joe Mixon. If you don't know what that is from, you should probably go watch Star Wars A New Hope. Joe Mixon just scored 34 points against the Cowboys to bring his already impressive scoring average up to 21.5 points per game. Again, that is despite leaving one game about halfway through earlier in the season. And just like, I know we've talked about this a little bit last couple of weeks, but I looked even a little bit more into it, and it is just really crazy what he's done this season, just from a volume and production standpoint. I mean, his box scores look like Derrick Henry box scores this year. He scored more than 20 fantasy points in all but 2 games he's played in, start to finish. He has not scored below 16 points in a full game he's played this year. He has over 20 carries in all but one of those games. He only has 18 receptions too, so it's not like he is doing it in the receiving game really, and like it is just pure rushing for Joe Mixon this year. You think back to his best season in Cincy from a fantasy perspective, it was a lot of it receptions on a lot of dump down stuff, and he just had so much volume that way, and that's how we got there. But he is like over 100 rushing yards in all but one game he's played start to finish this year, and in those games he's averaged over 4 yards a carry. Like he has, so if you look at just team rush attempts, like backfield share, he's at 55%. That is because he missed multiple weeks with, I believe it was the ankle injury. For context, Kyren Williams is number 1 at 77%. But if you just look at the games that Joe Mixon has played start to finish, his snap shares, he's at 81.7%. He has been the workhorse when healthy and active in fantasy football this year. And I just did not think he had this in him at this point in his career, but I'm happy for all parties involved that this is where we're at with Joe Mixon. I do wish the passing game would get a little bit more on track, but that's a separate conversation.
Yeah, Joe Mixon has been insane. When I was looking up the explosive rush rate, he was third, right under Saquon Barkley. And I mean, he's kept the Texans playoff viable because their passing game has not kept them playoff viable. And I know last week they had a called back 73-yard touchdown for Nico Collins, which everybody was upset about. But even outside of that, they were anemic for 2 weeks in a row.
And how inevitable Joe Mixon has been. Someone tweeted after that, it's like, well, this is just gives Joe Mixon more yards and opportunity for a touchdown is all this is doing, which is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
All right, Dalton, your next trophy.
My first one, it is a spoiler, but if you haven't watched the show, it's your fault. It's the You Traders Award, which is from Attack on Titan.
Oh, a little anime. Okay.
Yeah, a little anime, which is where the main character finds out 2 of his best friends are actually the villains. In the same way, I'm giving this to Josh Jacobs because the Raiders are traitors for what they did to us. Josh Jacobs is gone from dust to a very good starting option. He is on pace to have the most receptions he's ever had in an NFL season. He also finally got a receiving touchdown 6 years into his NFL career. And he's proved to be a true dual-purpose running back. And it's just very upsetting in the same vein as Saquon Barkley that there was a talent that was hidden on a terrible roster for so long that some people, I don't know who those people are, continuously dogged on Josh Jacobs and didn't believe in Josh Jacobs. And
some of us believed.
It was a slow ramp up in part of that because of the loss of Jordan Love, but his expected workload over the last 5 weeks is 5th among running backs. He's getting 78% of the snap share. He's in on almost every third down and distance goal opportunity, and he's on a really explosive offense, so he gets to do really cool things every week instead of running along in a 10-2 win and getting 20 carries for 60 yards because they can't block anything up for him. So Josh Jacobs is the winner of the U Traders Award because the Raiders for so long kept him bogged down and kept another good NFL talent from being something that we can be excited about on Sundays.
Yep. Always knew Josh Jacobs had this in him. On the rare cases where the Raiders were actually a decent team when he was there, he was always a good player. So, yeah, love to see it for Josh Jacobs this year. A guy who comes to mind as a potential candidate for this in the future would be Ramondre Stevenson, but he just signed a new contract with the Patriots. So I fear that we are stuck with Ramondre trying to power through a bad situation. But he's another guy who's like kind of in that same vein of I think he's a very good player.
Was also on my list, but the Traders would still be his own team who didn't start him. So
okay, my next one is the Walk with Dignity, You Giant Toddler award. That is from Schmidt on New Girl. And this one goes to none other than Aaron Rodgers. I told you we would get to the Jets at some point. He's the QB 15 this year, fresh off of, had a nice little 16-point game and a loss, had a 4-point game and a 31-6 loss the week before that to the Cardinals. Brees Hall, still great, still usable. The biggest impact of this, you mentioned it earlier with Garrett Wilson, is obviously on these receivers in Wilson and Adams. I mean, I think they both have the weekly upside that they probably will and are ranked as a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 in most weekly ranks, but the floor is almost nothing. Like the floor is almost a 0-point game. Actually, for a while, Davante Adams had literally 0 yards for like half the game last week, and I thought that was going to happen. 4 of Davante Adams' 5 games as a Jet have been single digits, and I watch him, and I just think it's the quarterback's fault a lot more than him. I still think he's a great player. Garrett Wilson has 5 games this year with less than 6 points. I have said pretty firmly, I think he's a great player. This, to me, goes back to the quarterback. Like, there's so many instances this year of him missing throws, walking around with that slumped shoulder, empty stare that you see from Aaron Rodgers all the time. He's played now over half a season for the Jets. His highlight is still carrying the American flag out on the field last season. That is and will be the best thing he ever did in a New York Jet uniform, because he will not be their quarterback next year, because guess what? The coach is fired. The GM is now fired. Somehow Nathaniel Hackett is going to make it to the end of the season, it seems. But I digress there. I mean, he ended the game last week by taking 2 sacks, and they were not immediate pressure sacks because these were, situations where they were only rushing 3 or 4 guys. They were playing back. And he, I think, decided, I don't want to throw interceptions on these passes. I'm just going to eat it, and we're going to lose the game. Compare that to Mahomes, where they were down 3 or 7. I don't remember what, but it was a 1-possession game. The Chiefs down 9 points, minute left. They aren't winning the games. Mahomes doesn't care, keeps trying, throws a pick on a 4th down arm punt because he's trying to make a play. And then you look at Rodgers, who just cowardly takes 2 sacks, doesn't even try, and the game is over. Like, this dude has a lower winning percentage as the Jets quarterback than both Zach Wilson and Sam Darnold did. I have discovered that people seem to think, and by people I mean Packers fans, that he will be the Vikings quarterback next year. So I'll be curious to see if that Brett Favre career path plays out. McCarthy had to have another surgery. That's why people are thinking that.
I would roll with Sam Darnold, but just sign him back.
But Rodgers has been so bad, just so despicable, and just he himself, he may be a genius, but he is washed at this point on the football field.
Yeah, I mean, it's just terrible. The Jets just fired their GM, and their owner has been tapped to be, yet again, the ambassador to the United Kingdom by President Trump. So I'm not sure who is making decisions in the building at this point, because they're out of people. And all-time bad vibes for the New York Jets franchise. The great news for them is that their biggest in-state rival for viewers is the New York Giants, and they are both equally poorly managed and doing a poor job.
Thank God for Johnny that we have Red Zone. Can you imagine Johnny getting stuck with Jets or Giants on every noon window of the entire season? How
and he finally left Colorado the moment the Broncos got kind of exciting.
Red Zone really saving Johnny from some truly terrible football over the years. Dalton, your last trophy.
We went with anime again. It is
Nice.
spoiler. If this one is spoiler to you, you have problems. It's the You Killed Krillin award, which, if anybody doesn't know, it's when Goku goes Super Saiyan. This is a player who took somebody's career ending for them to become relevant and exciting, and that player is Drake May. Jacoby Brissett, rest in peace. Your NFL career is over. But Drake May has gone Super Saiyan for what is a terrible New England Patriots and has made them more than just watchable, but like an actual fun team to watch.
Mm-hmm.
For one, Drake May currently is on pace to outscore in points per game. CJ Stroud, there was a lot of discussion around how successful Drake May could be. Drake May has proven to be very successful behind the worst offensive line in football and probably the worst pass catching core of any NFL quarterback right now. And he is doing it on a weekly basis where I don't think his offensive coordinator is calling good games. But he is a player who I'm very excited about in the future and should have a long running career, just like Dragon Ball Z has a long running career for us. And I'm just very glad that Jacoby Brissett won't be playing any more snaps for the New England Patriots.
I talked about this a little bit with the buying Ramondre Stevenson a couple weeks ago, that it's just nice to have any life injected into this offense. I know that the coaches hate Jalen Polk, but I still think Jalen Polk is an all right little player. You mentioned Pop Douglas, like pretty solid player. Like there are guys who are there who could be legitimately fantasy relevant if Drake May continues to improve down the stretch for your fantasy playoffs.
Yes. And he seems to be getting better every week, and he's making good decisions. And Pop Douglas is kind of exciting with the ball in his hand. So I'm all here for it. I will be watching more New England Patriots games.
So someone's asked just a blanket question: who could I trade Davante Adams for? He's trying to do a 1-for-1, trying to win now. I'm assuming this is redraft. If this is dynasty, let us know. This is probably a tough time to trade Davante Adams because the Jets and everything has just kind of reached peak badness for the Jets right now. I mean, I don't know. Could you trade him for Deebo? It's redraft. Could you trade him for Deebo Samuel, another guy who things are kind of peak terrible for right now? That might be a little much.
The two players that come to mind, one of them is less spicy than the other. Calvin Ridley, I think, would be a good 1-to-1.
He already has Deebo, so that was off the table.
So terrible. So Calvin Ridley, if their owner hasn't caught on yet, like Calvin Ridley has sneakily been like one of the best fantasy wide receivers the last 3 or 4 weeks.
And you talk about touchdown getting called back for Nico Collins. Ridley had a touchdown get called back, or a long play. I think it was touchdown get called back last week.
You having Deebo makes this a little worse, but the second, because you have to be a little sneaky with this because people know the situation with the Jets is Juwan Jennings. I think Juwan Jennings is a legitimately good starter for you. Probably not the same upside Adams gives, but a lot more of a safer floor. And we've still seen he still has the best game of any wide receiver this season. So those would be two players I would be looking at if you're looking for a 1-to-1 at the wide receiver market. Running back, it's just a lot harder.
It's really hard at running back because it goes from usable to not pretty quickly.
Really
Just looking at the list, I think maybe the sweet spot is Bucky Irving. Could you get Bucky Irving off the bye, or I don't know, DeAndre Swift is another a guy that we don't really believe in, and you're definitely gonna have some ups and downs, but he's been decently productive. I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah, it's tough trading for him. And I haven't been a dynasty league, and I know Evan does.
Yep.
And I've just kind of buckled in for the ride because I know I'm not going to go out there and get anything worthwhile for it.
Yeah, in dynasty it's a little different. In redraft, you can trade him for less of a name, but a guy who has produced. I think Ridley is probably the best one that we've come up with so far. I think before Tajay Spears got hurt, Tony Pollard could have been one, but I think now that Tajay Spears is probably out again, that's not happening. So Ridley and Bucky Irving, I think, are probably kind of the two crossover points that I think you could get done right now.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, last one. I have a drop for this, and real.
I love that you already sent the trade, man.
All right, my last trophy.
Finally, I want to thank God because God gave me this Dundee, and I feel God in this Chili's tonight.
The I feel God in this Chili's trophy This is a split award. This is going to two people. This is going to J.K. Dobbins and Ladd McConkey. First, let's start with Ladd McConkey. Wide receiver, 16. Just had a nice little 15-point outing last week. And man, he looks really, really good. The rookie report on reception perception from Matt Harmon is quite good for this player. 75.8% success rate against man, 80% success rate against zone. It is just 25% against press, but he's only been pressed 4 times, so he's 1 of 4, basically. Which, I mean, what can you really learn from that? But his success rate is the best of any of the rookies in the sample against man-to-man. And against zone, he is tied for third with our guy, Jalen Coker, of all people. So, Ladd McConkey has been awesome. And you look at his chart, he's basically good at everything. Outs, corners, posts, comeback routes, curls. He is just a complete player, just a little small. Don't want to get him probably outside, singled up, but he can win downfield in just about every way if you can get him in the right situations. And the Cardinals are actually, the Chargers are passing the ball a lot more down the stretch than they did to start the season. I think they were 25th in drop back rate over expected the first month of the season. Now they are 9th. And obviously, Justin Herbert is a very, very good quarterback. Quentin Johnston is an okay supplement at receiver, and Ladd McConkey is just a really good player playing with a really good quarterback in a really good system. All of those things are kind of coalescing to you're starting Ladd McConkey, no questions asked, I think.
Yeah,
down the stretch.
If you're going off vibes, the Chargers might have the best vibes in the NFL right now. One, we're 10 games into a season, and you have Jim Harbaugh coming out there, and he's saying, I want to retire with Justin Herbert as my quarterback. You have Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh wearing the same shoes because they want to be like each other. And then you have the quote that comes out today where Jim Harbaugh is talking about you don't want to be – if people start telling you you're playing good, they're trying to make you soft, and you're never going to – it is immaculate vibes. And for once – in that Bengals game, the Chargers didn't charge her.
They came so close. They came so close.
Did. But all 12 of the Chargers fans have to be incredibly excited about this season. And, I mean, seeing some Derwin James, T. Higgins trading their jerseys, maybe a little T. Higgins coming to the Chargers, some exciting stuff.
That would be electric.
That would be the most electric outcome for T. Higgins, 100%.
Well, I mean, the Chiefs, but
I don't know anymore. If there's a team that's wide receiver injuries are a thing on, I don't want T. Higgins around the Chiefs locker room.
Well, so you're sending him to the Chargers. Got it. Nice.
New vibe. It's a new era in Los Angeles. But yes, they have found, and I think Jim Harbaugh's probably a frequenter of Chili's, so this fits them all around.
I'm sure he probably is. And the spirit of this award, just like that, just drunk joy for me is really J.K. Dobbins' half of this award. I mean, people know I have a lot of blood, sweat, and tears invested in the J.K. Dobbins over the last couple of years. All 3 of those things, really. And just the fact that he has been able to play this whole season and just, number one, stay healthy the whole time, playing for a franchise where that does not happen for players a lot of the time in the past has just been great. And just think about running backs coming off of Achilles injuries, like the success stories. The Marlon Max, who not really a success story. Oh my God.
Foreman.
Yeah, I was going to say Deontay Foreman was who I was about ready to say, where his success is
he stayed in the league.
He stayed in the league, kind of been part of committees, done okay when his number has been called. Like, J.K. Dobbins is the RB13 right now. He is leading this backfield. To me, he's done enough to where they should bring him back to do the exact same thing if he finishes the season healthy and, all of that.
My only ask.
Yeah.
And I know he played for you at Michigan, Harbaugh. Let's just quit with Hassan Haskins. Let's just stop it.
And I'm glad you said that.
We'll always have week 4. Kamani Vidal truthers will always have week 4. And let's just stop with Hassan Haskins. And at that 1 yard, at the 1 yard line, let's just give the ball to J.K. Dobbins and see what happens.
Well, they did on fourth down when they got stopped 3 times with Gus Edwards and Son Haskins, and J.K. Dobbins made a great play, dove over guys, scored a touchdown. And I know it's frustrating, like to see Gus Edwards get carries, to see Hassan Haskins get carries. I saw multiple people talking about J.K. Dobbins as a guy to trade last week because of that concern. And I get it. It's not the perfect role, but he still played 71% of the snaps. Only 11 running backs had a higher snap rate. He just came out like he has not had nearly as many catches as you would think for a guy that played as much as he has this year, and a guy who can do that. So maybe that'll come around down the stretch a little bit. Who knows? But it is still a good role for a good player. I mean, you think about the play where he broke multiple tackles to gain 15 yards. You think about the game-winning touchdown where he made guys miss, like was jump cutting, and it was like, oh my God, this is rookie year J.K. Dobbins. Again, this is a guy who's had multiple serious knee injuries, tore his Achilles. It would not have been a surprise if he never played again or never made an NFL roster again. Or if he did, he's like clawing on special teams. He has legitimately been a very good player this year. And on the one hand, it's a little bit sad because you think about what his career probably should have been if not for all the injuries. But also, like, it's just really cool to see him play so well. He's in a spot where, I mean, you talk about the vibes between coach and player in that situation too seem to be quite high. And it's just all around great vibes for the Chargers. And I'm sure Jim Harbaugh really does feel God in Miss Chili's right now.
I think let's end this pod with some negative vibes.
Okay, cool.
I won't name names, but during this podcast, I was sent a tweet by somebody about Jalen Waddle, kind of hyping him up. So let me just share this and just take a minute, read this tweet. You tell me how the vibes are with Tua if we're talking about him having a career day.
Waddle's low on the target totem as Miami reintegrates Tua with easy throws and emphasis on run rather than downfield shots. Waddle posted 207 yards and 1 touchdown and 18 targets versus the Patriots last year. Oh, his birthday is Monday. Wow. Birthday boy.
Yep, birthday boy. We got a birthday boy, and I love this one right here. Who is Jalen Waddle? A league winner.
Oh, on that note, that is going to do it for episode 162 of the Half Point Per Podcast. Give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Half Point Per Pod. Subscribe to the YouTube Half Point Per Podcast. We will, of course, answer any questions as they come throughout the show. Our podcast is available anywhere you listen to your podcast. Leave us a 5-star review. Thank you all so much for listening today, and we will talk to you again next Monday.